I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 279th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today's panel will discuss civil unrest. And does it reflect the behavior of illegal immigrants carrying over from their homeland? Or does it reflect the new normal in the way Americans voice disapproval with their government? Today's panel begins with Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Next is Susan Hanlon, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired dean of the College of Business at the University of Akron. Followed by Patty Haskins, retired math teacher at Wadsworth Senior High and former member of the Wadsworth City Council. Finally, Mike Reese of Howard Hanna Realty and current member of the Wadsworth City Council. Bryan, are we in for a change in the way we practice self-government, or will the current unrest die down and things return to normal?
I'm an optimist here, John. You know, our country's had a long history of protesting and you could see riots, civil disobedience, civil unrest. But I think there's a scale here. You know, it sort of starts out with protesting, 100%, you have the right to protest. Peaceful protest. I'm reminded of the BLM peaceful protest that CNN reporter was talking about the peaceful protest, but the backdrop was, there was a fires going on in Washington, D.C., but it was peaceful. I think it's sort of a safety valve outlet for people when they feel that they're not being heard and that they have a right to protest. I guess I have a problem with when the protest turns into a riot and the media tries to frame it and create a narrative around it that it was peaceful, that it really wasn't peaceful. It was a riot, and they had to call in the state police. They had to call in the National Guard, those types of things. That's what, I guess I disagree with. And I don't know if there is a real solution to it, because we've had it happens a lot in a lot of different countries. Just look at Iran right now. They have a lot of civil unrest, more than they've had. They're basically trying to express their dissatisfaction with the current structure of their government, the mullahs and all that kind of stuff. From what I understand, upwards of over 2,000 protesters have been killed, and the government is trying to squash that, but I really don't think they're going to be successful in that, because the people are just fed up with the way they've been treated. You have a lot of groups, and the name of the group escapes me, but they're against oil. And what they'll do is they'll go into a museum and spray paint a particular very expensive piece of artwork, or they will glue their hand to, they go out in the middle of the road and they'll glue their hand to the road. And that seems to be happening more in Europe. I see those little reels where they go out and they jackhammer around it, and the guy walks off with a piece of pavement glued to his hand. That's his way of showing his disapproval for oil. But no, I don't think it has much to do with anyone that's come here recently from another country. I think we've been, our history has been very clear that, there's a lot of rioting and a lot of protesting and civil disobedience that goes on. You can look in the 60s, the 70s with the Vietnam War. I'm more of the peaceful protest. If Patty or Mike or Susan and I want to go out on East Park and stand there with our placards, we have every right to. But the minute we step out in the street and block traffic, that's where I think our right is sort of limited. So that's sort of my take on it.
Well, my question has to do with the native behavior of a lot of people that came to this country. We had open borders, wide open borders for 4 years, and millions of people from a lot of different places came into the country where they were used to behaving in a different way. Americans, I think, for the most part, adhere to peaceful protest, like you said. My question is, are we bringing a different kind of behavior in from different countries? Is that what we're looking at?
Where I haven't seen where have those protests been where it's just a particular group of people. I'm not sure I've seen those types of, I haven't seen a group of Somalis up in Minnesota protesting. I've seen these little sporadic reels of, a little group of people that support La Raza or whatever it is in LA. And when they pan out, it's like 20 people. So I haven't seen any real large scale protests of any group of people that have come here taken to the streets. Maybe I
Yeah.
just my algorithm is only throwing me things that it thinks I want to see, but I'd be interested if someone else can enlighten me where is this happening where we have a group of immigrants that have taken to the streets and are protesting in a different way. I just don't
Well, that seems like a media failure to me,
yeah.
to not show what's actually going on. Show us where all the action is and so forth. Susan, what
Yeah.
are your thoughts?
Yeah.
I didn't unmute myself. I guess, when I looked at the question, I was thinking along the lines that Bryan was too, because I also, I guess I just know what the media shows of particular demonstrations. And, the prompt that you sent us asked about, is this the new normal demonstrations? And I would say it is normal. It's not new, and kind of the same thing as Bryan noted. I mean, that's one of the things about the United States. And I do think people come here, and people did historically come here because you were allowed to publicly, state your opinion and your objections. I mean, face it, there's still countries in the world today that if some of the stuff that Americans say about our presidents and our, not just Trump, our presidents and our legislatures. I mean, you would not be waking up in your nice warm bed the next morning. I mean, you just aren't allowed to do it. I think one of the things, that concerns me is, are we, because of, and I do think the media fuels it, because I haven't firsthand seen any of this stuff, any of it, right? Are we getting to the point where people are going to be afraid to go out and protest because of all the law enforcement presence, and people they egg the law enforcement people on, and they do behave, I do think they behave poorly. I think they have forgotten that when a law enforcement officer tells you to do something, you do it. I mean, you can complain about it later.
Yeah,
But
it's more
you
than
really are
suggestion.
risking your life not to pay attention. Someone tells you get out of your car. You don't make them pull you out screaming and kicking. You don't try to you get out. Now, if I was in a situation like that, I guess that's easy for me to say because I've never had a police officer try to pull me out of my car. But I do think people are forgetting that. And right now it seems like, okay, we have border control officers, we have ICE officers, we have local police, we have National Guard. I mean, in some cases, we even have the actual military. There's a lot of law enforcement presence out there. And, I mean, we saw with Kent State. I mean, sometimes the presence of the law enforcement is what makes it go bad because people get, it ends up, it's not about the issue they're there for. It becomes, the police
That's
are
against
here. And
them.
yeah, and that's when bad things happen, I think. But yeah, so I'm not sure I answered the question the way you were hoping, but that was my response to the prompt that you sent us.
Well, maybe I asked the question poorly. Patty, what do you think?
Um, well, I agree with everything everyone has said. I mean, Bryan, when you talk about, protesting has gone on for years. I mean, let's go back to the beginning of our country. I mean, the Boston Tea Party was a protest as such. And we were the immigrants that were coming into the land. So from that standpoint, I guess that was a special group. Um, uh, John, as far as having a particular group of immigrants, I don't think that we're seeing that, but it is not um, odd for a certain group of people, like-minded people, to join together for a protest. Not everybody is interested or has a foot in the game for every single issue that comes up that we protest. I mean, let's go back to the age of for the suffragettes who protested in the country for the right for women to vote. Yes, that was almost primarily women, and you didn't see men doing that. And by the way, some of those protests did get out of hand. You could look at the civil rights era. You can look at, the 60s and the protests against the war. You can look at right to life people that, I think the right to life march is in Washington, D.C. this coming weekend. You can look at the present day issues that are, against ICE and against the targeting of immigrants by ICE. The only I did see one clip where there was a group, a specific group that was protesting, but it wasn't immigrants. It was Native Americans from Minnesota, who we could say they're probably the only non-immigrant families within the country. And they were protesting against ICE because they were being stopped and hauled in and detained. And and their families have been here forever. And, so from that standpoint, I don't see that any protests now are different. Now, I do think that we do see more of them, that it is more common for protests. Especially in all the ICE issue. If you look at the number of locations for protest, I mean, Medina's had one every other weekend, it seems, in the square. And we're seeing them in places where we wouldn't normally see protests. Are they more violent? Very honestly, I don't think they are right at this point, which is good. Now, there are some people that are being violent and breaking the law, and that has to be dealt with, but it's not, I remember some of the clashes during the Vietnam War. Just, look at Kent State and everything that went on with their protests. I don't think we've gotten to that point right now with the protests. So
I guess the concern that I have is that our media is not really giving us a full picture of anything. Their primary concern, to me, seems to be ratings. And so the things that they'll show on television are the things that are more attractive to the population. What do you think, Mike?
Oh boy, it's a mess, but we have it like I think everybody else has said that we have a long history of protests. That's what we do in America. When there's something that upsets us with our government or whoever's in control, we take to the streets, and it's a right. And uh, I see no problem with exercising that right. I think some of the times they do go too far. That's like Bryan said, with people blocking roads and stuff, you're not really helping your cause at that point. You're just making more people that might have supported you mad, you know? So when you're setting fire and breaking things in full-on riots, obviously that's a problem. But I think it was Martin Luther King that said, riots are the voice of the unheard. And it gets to that point where you just feel like you've tried and tried and tried and you're not being listened to. That's usually when it gets to that point. Also, I'd like to mention a lot of the times these peaceful protests do turn violent because of the response to them. So, and I think we know that during, James Rhodes' term as governor in Ohio during Kent State, during the race riots, what made those violent was introducing a
National Guard.
National Guard, it's like they were forcing a confrontation of something that didn't need to be. And that happens a lot now today. You're have a riot and then, somebody's like, Trump, it's like, I'm sending the National Guard. And that's a lot of times what makes those situations blow up, because then there's like a literal demarcation line. You have this side and this side, and then they go at it. So I think it's a problem. I think as far as the immigrants bringing that here, I don't think that's an issue at all. I think we do have a problem with there's a lot of illegal immigrants, and I don't think most people, if you're committing violence, committing crimes, and you're not here illegally, send them back. And I think that most people have no problem with that. But the way that they're targeting people, I think is what is really brought out all the people to protest and how they're doing things. And I don't think it's the immigrants that are protesting; it's American protesting on their behalf. I mean, look at Medina, look at the areas around here. Those aren't immigrants protesting; those are concerned citizens at how other human beings are being treated, not the immigrants themselves. And it has become crazy, especially with the ICE. They've kind of had carte blanche to do whatever they want in doing their work. I mean, there was just today a memo released from the director telling the agents that they can forcibly enter houses without a warrant, which is 100% unconstitutional. But they're doing it anyways. They just yesterday arrested a 5-year-old child from school and his dad, who I might add were not even illegal immigrants. They were immigrants, but they came through a point of entry. They still detain them. These are the types of things that are making people go out and it's not just making ICE look bad, but it's making law enforcement in general look bad. Look at where we live in Wadsworth. We have a really great police force. They act very professionally and they do their job right. They're making those guys look bad by, you're supposedly enforcing the law, but you're breaking laws to do it. So you're no better now. And I think that that's why people are really coming out and protesting. It's not what they're doing, but how they're doing it. And it's, these protests spread throughout the country, not even throughout the country, throughout the world. I mean, people are protesting our laws all over in Europe and, so it's,
I would like to point out something here because I was old enough to remember when Bill Clinton was president and that picture that went around the world of ICE agent or DHS agent that had a automatic weapon pointed in the face of this little boy, and they basically deported him.
Gomez.
Yes.
Are you talking about Elian Gonzalez? Yeah.
Yeah, Gonzalez. Forcefully.
Yeah, I remember that.
There seems to be this double standard that the media narrative plays to that, I saw this special when Barack Obama was the president. They had a ride along with these ICE agents. They were doing a great job. They went in, they took this predator, this murderer off the streets. They did all this kind of stuff. And now it's you can't there's these terrible ICE agents, and I'm not saying they're doing everything right, but there's clearly been a double standard in the media as to how they're reporting these particular things, and it doesn't serve the public. It doesn't do any good. I mean, you could look at any police department and just pick on the bad apple, and it basically makes the whole barrel look bad.
This in this case, the
Yeah.
bad apple is coming from their leadership, and it's going on down. You know, but you're right, and they did do that
Would you
stuff with
expand
previous
on
presidents,
Would
but
you expand on
they
what you
weren't allowed to do what they're doing now.
Yeah. The same, I think his name is Tom Holman. He received some sort of medal from Obama
Yeah.
for what he was doing. Obama took 3 million illegal immigrants off the street and everything, and they're nearly a peep. And it's the same guy that's worked for all these administrations. He's not a political player.
I think in
He's
this
just a
case,
civil
once again, it's
servant.
his boss.
You know,
Yeah.
he's worked for Barack Obama. I think he was with I don't know if he was 30 years was it with Bill Clinton, but he has a long history of working in the government in these particular things, and he's doing the same thing that he's done with everybody. And now all of a sudden, because it's not politically expedient, and the narrative with the media is ICE is bad, DHS is bad, all these people are bad, defund them. I think it's to me it's just a non-starter. I mean, I just they're doing their job.
I think a lot of it, though, is the way it's been gone about. No one in their right mind would say that we should not get rid of rapists, murderers, whatever. I am tired of seeing the same 20 portraits of immigrants saying, hey, we got these 20 out. But what about the other 500 that they've removed?
Well,
They are going about it in the wrong way. I mean, I saw clips, and John, this is what you're talking about. I saw clips on one station where a man was being detained. He said, I'm a citizen. And the ICE agent says, but you have an accent. And because of that, he was detained because he had an accent. I mean, it's that I have heard ICE agents being interviewed and saying, yes, what we do if we have our targeted person that we're going after, but if we happen to see a Latino walking down the street while we get there, or there's somebody else that looks to be Somalian or someone else that has an accent, we're just going to round all them up as well. I think what we should be doing is more targeted types of deportment and arrest and detention. And this can be done with a heck of a lot less ICE agents.
But how do we know that didn't take place in the Obama administration? Because the media didn't record any of those.
Right.
They weren't out there trying to run these people down. They were doing great. So we don't have a basis.
But I don't think Obama
were they
ever
out
sent
on the street
2,000
in
ICE
groups
agents
patrolling during
city.
Obama?
They
Were they
took,
out there
they took
in
3
multiple
million
cities
people
on the street
I mean,
with the
they were
force?
busting down doors and all that kind of stuff during the Obama administration. They were scooping these people up. All you got to do is listen to Joe Biden when he was in the Senate, Bill Clinton when he was illegal alien bad. We got to get rid of him. Hillary Clinton. So we don't have a basis. There were no ride-alongs. How they scooped up 10 people in Phoenix at the Home Depot, they did it during Obama. But now that's just targeting. You can't target these people. Well, that's where they're congregating. You see what I'm saying? I'm not arguing that they're doing everything right, but I'm just saying we don't have a basis because the media narrative ignored it for 4 years or 8 years.
All I ask is that they follow the law doing their job. That's all. They do their job. Just follow the law while you're doing it.
And
I was in the Army in 1957, and there were a whole bunch of us that were teenagers, and we were in the Army, and we did a lot of stupid things.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, I don't know much about the National Guard troops that are on the streets now, but I'm wondering if they're a hell of a lot smarter than we were. Susan, what do you think?
Well, I one thing that I think about when I see these officers of any type, law enforcement of any type, like having these confrontations or shooting people or whatever. When I was on city council the first time I was on, one of the things they did, and Mike, if you get a chance to do this, you should do it. They took us to observe some police training. Okay, and it was because they wanted to purchase some type of equipment. Do you remember this, Patty? And they took us, so like we went on a Saturday and we we went to their training facilities and we had a demonstration of this video type of thing that they wanted to use to train officers with. And the big takeaway I had out there from that was that any kind, Army, police, whatever, they are trained to protect themselves, because if they go down, they can't help other people. And so, and yeah, if you're not really well trained, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not really mentally stable, that type of training, can go awry. It can go overboard. But that is how they're trained, and they do some serious training. And a lot of times, thank goodness, they don't have to use it, but they have to be able to know if they feel like they're threatened and they're going to go down, they can't go down. Because they're supposed to protect, they're supposed to stay there. And, I never knew that. I never knew the extent of that. I mean, I guess if I thought about it, I may have come up with that, but I never thought about it. And I think that's important. And that's why, putting too many of them out there where they really don't need to be is just asking for trouble.
Right.
And you
as
bring up a
far
good
as
point.
training, far as training, the ICE agents that are out there, a lot of the new ones, they've cut back on the amount
and maybe they
of time
haven't
that
had
They
Yeah,
only have to have like
training.
2 weeks of training.
Yeah.
And some
because
have
they
been proven
had
to
such
be
a hard
That's dangerous.
recruitment drive
Yeah.
that they're not getting that training. It's funny you mentioned that, Susan, because I just met with the safety director yesterday. And one of the things he emphasized how much training our police force goes through.
Yeah.
Every time they get a new piece of equipment, they have to go through training on that piece of equipment. These police are trained constantly. Now you're
Right.
taking a bunch of people off the street and giving them, a 2-week crash course and sending them out there. You're going to have problems.
Yeah.
I think towns like Wadsworth are a whole different world than what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
that's right.
comparing police
Cops
to
retire and they never show
agents.
a weapon.
Yeah. And you think about, Wadsworth is Wadsworth. Well, take that. What if you're in Philadelphia or Chicago or, yeah.
And all police forces are trained like that. They're trained constantly
Right.
throughout their careers. They're trained constantly.
To
But when you're
protect
taking a bunch
themselves.
of people and they're advertising, we just need a ton of people, giving them like crash course, sending them out there with guns.
Right.
Of course you're going to have problems because they're not trained to react. And when you're sending military out to patrol streets, they aren't trained to react.
They're not trained in the
as
same way at
Well,
all.
and you do hear the argument though too. Maybe we're put the argument that they're like when there's a domestic violence thing, maybe it's not an armed police officer that needs to go. We're getting off subject, I understand, but maybe it's not an armed police officer that needs to show up at this doorstep. It's a trained, behavioral
like an
type.
intervention specialist.
Yeah, right. Something like that. Because, and are we doing the same thing here with this rioting where, they used to be called peace officers, right? What is a peace officer? I don't know.
Keep your peace.
But
I think this is relevant though, because it's what the protests now are based on.
And that's the way Trump does everything. It's just too much, right? Like we're putting too many ICE officers out there. We have too many cameras out there. No doubt about that. Some of this stuff you see, it's like, who was taking this video? Who was just standing there taking the video?
Yeah. Well, folks, we'll see you all in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.